Fantastic. So here we are again, Paul and myself. We started this conversation talking about leadership development, realized that what is it to be human, to understand what actually are we developing, and then had a whole series of broader and broader discussions, which have been hugely valuable. And I'm really grateful, Paul, for you and your thoughts and your time. I think it's also about creating a lens to look through, look at things as well when we're talking about a development. So artificial intelligence is an interesting topic, and I think it's increasingly more difficult to rationalize things. And artificial intelligence, I think, is probably a useful thing to talk about. How do we rationalize artificial intelligence, and what's the sort of lens we look at it through to, as an example of maybe other things that are equally pertinent, Paul. So what are your thoughts? Over to you.
Well, I have some thoughts. I mean, normally what happens is, I go there and then you go there. And I was actually thinking today is maybe I could talk for 5 minutes because I don't know that much about it. And I'll be very interested to hear what you say. So I'd rather this was a dynamic dialogue than just me, dropping it all out. I mean, I've been using AI to write with for longer than I'd care to admit. And for me, it was just, I felt it was like finding the cheat codes, and it made my job a lot easier, and I was pretty happy about that. When OpenAI and ChatGPT came out, I started playing with it, and I have been playing with it, and I'm very impressed. And even though I have an optimism bias, I just can't really see this as a good thing. I put up a post on Facebook last week, which was like, this is, as far as I'm concerned, AI looks like if I suddenly had the powers to become invisible, right? It's like, I'm sure there are good things I could do with that, but I can't think of that because I'm too busy right now doing skeevy stuff. And I really think that's what, that's, when it's almost when you give an unearned power to an immature child, it's like he's not going to necessarily do something, give the gift of fire to adolescents, and they're not going to be sort of like, creating bonfires for orphans. So, that's my general feeling about it. I think that, and this is what I've been saying to trainer. I've been saying, look, this is going to change my life. This is going to be changing my life in a way that NFTs haven't, cryptos haven't, just like a whole bunch of things which were supposed to haven't, but this will. I mean, even today, that's one of the reasons, thank you for those nice words about my videos. That's why I've gone back to videos. Because I know that there's just an explosion in written content on LinkedIn. Like the vast majority of it is garbage anyway. And now more people are going to figure out how you can, if you know what you're doing, you can actually use that to create good content. But I don't want to be a snob. I don't really think that's what's going to happen. So there's a change that I made today. It's like, I'd better get into video. But on the other hand, dude, it's like there's already software which could deep fake my face. And on Descript, which is the video platform that I have on my computer, I've got an AI version of my voice. So I could just write a script and it would be read in my voice. It would sound a bit weird, but it would be my voice. And, depending on what the context was or the subject matter, that wouldn't necessarily matter. I like to take the view that I like to take about is, isn't it amazing that sort of like, people are running after supernatural powers, right? When really, if they really wanted supernatural powers, all they needed to do was actually get off their butt on a Sunday morning and go to church. And I think it also reminds me of that bit in Star Wars where they're on the Death Star and Vader says, do not be too sure of this super, do not be too sure of this technological marvel that you've created for yourself. It pales in significance to the power of the Force. And then it's like, enough of your old wizard's tricks for us, Vegas. And it's like, the Force choke. And that's how I feel. It's like, you can have all the AI you like. It's nothing compared to the power of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Right. It's nothing compared to the power that God's people can wield on earth. Even as you know, even as to how you can feel if you're born again and you have the gifts of the Spirit. It's like AI won't do that. So I think it's going to. I'm enjoying using it. I'm not optimistic. I think it's going to be abused more than it's going to be used properly. I worry about the effects that it has on the younger generation who aren't being challenged cognitively anyway. I think, and aren't, you know, I think it will damage their opportunities to think, and I think it will damage their opportunities to communicate.
Yeah.
Both of which have been severely compromised by social media, surveillance capitalism, you know, lockdowns, all that stuff. So really, it the last thing I'd say is it falls into Babylon.
Yeah. No, brilliant. Thanks for that. I think the first thing I'd say is it's interesting how much difference we have in terms of view of this, Paul. Given the fact we have so much in common in terms of where we've got to. I think the second thing I'd say is that I've studied artificial intelligence. I've given 4 talks on artificial intelligence to the public sector, to leading conferences around the world, you know, with the great and the good, hundreds of people. And I've also studied the psychology of it. You know, and going back to when this launched, it was PwC largely, and I know the backgrounds, I know the people there. I know actually without saying too much, I know that they realised that it was wrong, but they pursued it anyway. And yet nobody could do anything about it within the big 4, and that's very much the case. So, and I find myself personally, my personal position is that I would not have anything to do with artificial intelligence, except in a few isolated instances. So there's some things that we just can't do as human beings, or we're not best placed to do. Things like routing. If you've got to if you're a driver, Paul, and you've got to make 24 odd deliveries or 10 deliveries, the number of configurations goes to billions quite rapidly. So you simply are not the best person to do that. Similarly, you know, when it comes to fusion, you know, from a technological perspective, fusion, sort of fission, which is smashing atoms together rather than blowing them apart to create energy. You need artificial intelligence to do that, and that doesn't really bother me. It's a tool to do a specific thing which we can't really do particularly well, and we just cannot keep up with the speed at which these atoms smash into each other anyway. It's just absurd to think we could do that in any other way. So that's my perspective on it. That said, what concerns me about this, right, and this is where my company turnaround background comes from, is the direction of travel, right? So when I'm turning a company around, I try and understand what's the direction of travel, what's got it in the shit, and actually, is this a direction that's going to be good or bad, and also, does it create a future, a long-term future, both in terms of profit and relationships? And when I look at artificial intelligence, it's an absolute car crash, and it's broadly it's an absolute car crash. And so you mentioned some aspects of ChatGPT. Thinking, Paul, you know, if we are...
Well, can I just interject? The one thing I meant to say is, and I don't think a lot of people really understand this, but the whole idea of artificial is very important, because it really is artificial intelligence. I mean, ChatGPT is set up very cleverly to look like it's thinking, but it's not. It's predicting.
Yeah.
And it's predicting in a multitasking in the classic computer sense. AGI, the next gen, that is beyond scary when it can actually start thinking.
Yeah,
and
I think I think anything that reduces our ability to think, Paul, is really very dangerous. So, and also anything that controls dialogue is also very dangerous, because I'm absolutely certain that 90% our dialogue controls us. We don't control our dialogue, Paul, for a variety of reasons. And just the very fact that ChatGPT spits out texts. It's very clever text. I've actually read some of it. It bloody concerns me when I put my winning thinking hat on. And it's also highly manipulated even before it started. So, you know, when we talk about, you know, woke, weirdly enough, when it comes to woke in artificial intelligence, it actually covers up evil. It doesn't flag up evil. So this is the antithesis, Paul, of exactly, you know, because and it's actually the reason why it's there, the reason why people are trying to program ethics into social media and these types of systems is because we cannot cope with a variety of views, and it's a sort of fundamental cover-up. And I think it's tending now when you talk about climate change, you know, there's some really fundamental biblical principles that, and actually artificial intelligence, that bloke John, can't remember what his surname is, he says,
John Lennon.
Yeah, John Lennox, he says that artificial intelligence is 2,000 years too late. That problem has already been solved. In so much that, you know, Jesus is God, we have an opportunity to connect with God. Actually, our intelligence is highly driven by relationships, and guess what? You know, Jesus is all about relationships. It's why he died on the cross. So actually, you know, that problem has been solved. And the level of hubris that this entails is absolutely, you know, really truly frightening, I think. And the level of misalignment and the level of ideology that's coming out of this is, you know, just becoming overwhelming.
Yeah, it's like giving flamethrower to a 3-year-old.
Yeah, well, I think it's worse than that. I mean, but if you just take climate change, you know, for example, you know, the Bible actually has got all the answers to all these questions. We are custodians of, you know, whether or not what we do, Paul, if we drop our fag ends, if we, you know, drive around in a 4-litre car or a Citroen 2CV, whatever we choose to drive, we're the custodians of the planet. But actually, the Bible's very clear that we do not fix the planet, right? And that is really dangerous territory. And I think a lot of the thinking, the psychology, when I listen to this, actually is that more tech will fix it. In fact, that bloody book in the background, one of them, is actually about the psychology of tech. And one of the insane mantras of technology is that we just need to do more of it and it'll get better to fix these things. And, you know, this stupid, it's so bizarre and weird because they talk about bias, but actually artificial intelligence 100% runs on bias, right? And who exactly is who is actually qualified to set that bias? And we're certainly not, because this is then again stepping over the edge into what's right or wrong, which is godlike territory. And there's a few dimensions around artificial intelligence that we will not fix, like the speed, right? We will never be able to keep up with it in terms of speed. It's also creating artwork as well, which is and quite frankly,
and some of it's some of it's great.
Some of it's really quite funky.
It came up with a really good tagline for my business. A business without a story is like a person without a soul.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Thanks, ChatGPT. I'll run with that. Thank you.
Well, yeah. But I think it's.
I mean, I'm not saying it's the best tagline ever written, but I was like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? But I think if you just come back to the dimensions, I think I did these series of sodding talks during the shutdown to try and understand what had shifted, what had people realized, and actually what's happened afterwards. And I think I know broadly the mantra that we went into that had been going for about 40 years was around growth and domination. And there was a shift broadly to profit and relationships. People had a sort of inkling into what does good look like, almost like, you know, the kingdom of God, you know, in terms of that period of time, just really leveling time, extraordinary time. And now we've turned our back on that. We've gone back to, let's go back to where we were. And actually, no one wants to go back to where we were. So there are 7 things I came up with. One is creating work. It's fun, and, you know, at all levels, because the fundamentals of work are critical to our well-being, Paul.
Yeah.
And both for people like you and people like me, it completely screws work. And more worryingly, it completely screws work for disadvantaged people who have got low IQ, right? Low IQ people are going to be completely left out of this. So that's a quick touch on that one. The other one is in relation to increasing prices and inflation. But actually, there's a huge amount of drive. A lot of this is around the psychology of the WEF. and controlling their empire and protecting their wealth. And you've got people like Bill Gates and other people who are really out to retain control. So technology is absolutely, I'm absolutely certain it's about maintaining their wealth and rather than our wealth. We've got people relationships, I think, is another one. Tech atomizes, AI manipulates, and it's about control of attention. And practically, Paul, we talk about, you know, spiritual well-being coming before emotional well-being, coming before
Yep.
blah 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 blah. But actually, if you, Paul, even you and I, with what we know, if we haven't got time in the day to spend with God, frankly, then we are going to lose it, right? And we are so, and actually the motivation of tech and AI is absolutely about manipulating. It's about predicting what we're purchasing. So it's, you know, it's about this bubble, and it's about keeping us in that bubble. And it's no wonder it's no wonder that
and in some ways it becomes an ersatz god. You know, I wrote a post the other day taking you know, the idea, which wasn't mine, it was Professor Galloway's, the idea that, you know, we worship four gods now: the god of security, Amazon; the god of social the god of social status, Facebook and Instagram; the god of status, sorry, the god of social, Facebook and Instagram; the god of status, Apple, and I can't remember what the fourth one was. Probably, you know, I don't know, one of the other. Oh yeah, of course, the god of wisdom, Google. Like Google knows everything. Google is God. Like, no, Google's not God.
Well, I think what we're talking about a situation, I think, broadly of a wisdom is a gift from God. And we're talking about a situation where people think they're wise and they're just not, Paul.
No, absolutely, 100%.
I mean, it's so bonkers. I mean, there's something I shared earlier, which is pretty left of field. It's a poem that was written that said there's a guy who got shot in the First World War, American guy, talking about only God can make a tree. Right.
Yeah.
And actually, that's got real relevance in terms of climate change, because trees actually are the solution. Vegetation actually is the solution to climate change. Everything else we do is complete nonsense. The notion, I mean, to give an example of a misaligned, as you say, these elements of God, which I totally agree with. The notion of taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere using technology is so absurd, both commercially, technically, and also you were just talking about, you know, those social media platforms. From a psychological perspective, there's a psychologist called Brown, and he says, because basically what you're doing is you're bypassing, right, your dopamine and serotonin systems, Paul, by pressing buttons, and your buttons are different to my buttons, and they're supposed to be bespoke, but that's very dodgy territory. And he has this guy, Peter Brown, who's a very famous psychologist, said in one word, don't. It's such dangerous territory. And it's, again, the assumption is, I mean, one of the talks I gave was around, there was a guy called, I know, can't remember his name, but I picked up in his talk that people are machines, right? We are not machines. But it was interesting because the fact he was talking about AI, people are machines, justified everything else, Paul. And this is why the psychology matters. Because if you think people are machines, then you would go down a route of, well, let's build a better machine, right? But actually, one of the things I talk about is, you know, our ability as a machine, our ability to fix problems is very much dependent upon the relationships around us, Paul. Like you and I having this conversation, and when you look at the way artificial intelligence, right, fixes problems, it's oil and water, right, and there's absolutely no relationship. It's just the other interesting thing is that it's artificial intelligence is the ultimate attack tool as well. So if you really do want to win, right, artificial intelligence is the way to do it. But the outcome is utter destruction. So as a business attack tool for a company which is the philosophy of China, it's excellent. The challenge is like Solomon and David, do you do a deal with the devil, or do you sort of steer a steady course to avoid it? So and I think one of the other things that in terms of the top 7 is about local and community. I noticed that there was a much more during the shutdown pandemic, and the various discussions I had was there was a much greater focus and need for local and community to engage. I mean, even at the simplest level, people walking down the road and saying hello to each other, Paul, which was just
absolutely
extraordinary. And so, but actually, that's very countercultural with the WEF, because that's exactly what they don't want. They want centralized control. And so the notion of local community, which is the reason why I've started my cycling business, and it's been excellent, because it provides that local connection, and local supporting the local community. And at its simplest level, just take that, getting people out on their bikes, Paul, safely, particularly women who typically have very unsafe bikes, dramatically changes someone's life. And so there's some really practical aspects to it. And I think the other one is around intimacy. Now, I think we operate basically, all of us want to be left alone to do our own thing in our own way. So you might say, if you're my boss, Paul, you might say, I want you to build a windmill or something. So okay, fine, give me a bit of time, I'll go and figure out how to do that. And I'll come back. But you don't want too much aggravation in between. You want to have the right amount of steer, right amount of intervention. And also you want to be valued when you come back for what you think. You want to be valued for who you are, Paul. If you're Paul and I'm Tom, what does that mean? Who are you? And also you want to be valued for having a different opinion. But actually, when this woke ideology and stuff, which is sort of baked into the AI stuff, actually doesn't give you that flexibility. And actually, the way economies sodding well work as well is that really, if you look at what works, neo-Marxism doesn't, because it's no freedom, and it just crushes economies. And actually, when you look at, you mentioned the Apples and other businesses like that, let's hope they're less parasitic, but or just take a more, the development of the Ford motor car company or whatever, industries like that.
The problem is Google started off with good intentions. Remember Google in the days of don't be evil. And so did Apple. I mean, Apple's great. Apple absolutely did revolutionize the way people thought, but slowly, is I don't understand the business landscape, but it's like somehow they've been allowed to form monopolies, which is the basis of surveillance capitalism, right? It's like, even Facebook was wholesome for a while.
Yeah.
Amazon started off as a bookseller. What's not to like? It's just, a really simplistic view, but a view that's nevertheless right at one level, is that if you don't have Christ in the center of your organization, then if things go well for you, you're going to be serving your interests rather than other people's.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at Google, I know that business quite well. I know the person who did a lot of their people development. I've met a very smart woman. I can't remember her name. But that business completely lost it because it sort of went through, started off pretty well, but they had a very mechanistic sort of psychological approach to their people development, Paul, which was nearly very good, but also very weird. And I think absolutely correct. I think, unless you've got Christ at the center of businesses, you've got no chance of really steering the ship in the right direction. And actually, what does that mean? Christ is about freedom, it's about relationships, and it's about profit. Profit really matters. And that business.
Oh, and long-term success principles.
Yeah. And that's why when I started off talking, Paul, it's about what's the psychology that's driving this business, what's the direction of travel, because that's why artificial intelligence and technology concerns me, because it tends to consume in a parasitic way productive businesses, And actually, what happened, and people in businesses like Google, fundamentally, you've got a real job on if you are asking them to do something that's wrong. And what do I mean by that? If you actually want to control people's attention, which is what Google and I think they now own YouTube, don't they? Another under the alphabet. That's all about control of attention, right? And actually, if you try and do that without manipulating people, without pressing dopamine buttons and stuff, you can't do it. And actually, I mean, YouTube did try and do it, but actually they noticed that their viewing figures dropped off a cliff. So you've got this, actually, is this thing viable? Where's it going? Should it be stopped? And what's the life cycle of these businesses? And actually, this is what I think the problem is, because a lot of these businesses are simply trashing value in a way that we sort of touched on in relation to creativity, lack of thinking, lack of freedom, and sort of sitting on top. You've also got businesses like booking.com, which sit on top of businesses and take the lion's share of the margin. So if you're running a bed and breakfast, 30% or whatever the margin is goes to the booking.com for doing virtually bugger all. But actually, there's no option apart from to use them. Otherwise, you don't really have a business. And actually, interesting enough, there's another element here, which, again, in terms of psychology, which is highly destructive. And it's a Chinese tactic, which is not particularly well known, but I'm familiar with the psychology of this, which is it's profitless growth, Paul. A lot of the Chinese technology companies are profitless growth, and they are utterly destructive. And Google have partnered with another company, I forget, which is actually aiming to employ absolutely nobody. So there's this sort of utopia. What does utopia look like? There's this underlying psychology, which is hardly surprising why these businesses are getting into trouble, because they are, comes down to good versus evil. You talked about good versus evil. How do you measure what's good and evil? I don't think Google have got that. I mean, how the hell do you do that?
Well, that was the problem. It's like, how do they define evil? They're a bunch of godless pagans. So it's like, good luck with that.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think it's like, I mean, the overall trajectory of this, I think, is it really concerns me, because there's various factors, I think, and actually, because it's wrong, rather than slow down, they're actually trying to accelerate and steamroll us. That's actually, I think, what's happening when I look at the overall top level picture, because we should be able to revolt, Paul. You and I should be able to revolt, but when people do revolt, and I'm pleased to see there are more people revolting, they're just getting cancelled and marginalized and being labeled as Luddites or something. And actually, when I'm talking about bloody technology, I'm a fellow who's Institute of Engineering and Technology, so I'm somebody who's led more change in industry than probably anybody else that is on this call or a lot of other calls. So I'm by far a Luddite, but it's so severe to me when I look at this from a psychological, spiritual, and a business perspective, that most of these businesses are running themselves into the ground. And I think there's something exciting about this, which is if you have got the balls to sort it out and find the humility and courage to do that, then actually, what does good look like? It is actually a sense of humility, Paul. It's about understanding, look, we cannot fix the planet. And tech is not the answer to everything. And it's then it's like waking up after a really bad hangover after the office party, which I used to have a bit of a challenge with that as a senior manager, and thinking, what on earth happened last night? It's like that awful sort of feeling of in the good old days.
What are all these photocopies of my arse doing everywhere?
What was that? Sorry.
What are all these photocopies of
Yeah, and I think that's what good looks like. It's about the morning after. And I think there are a lot of people who are drunk on this stuff and on this sort of crest of the wave, which is just the party is not sort of stopping, but it's not going to, like alcohol or like any drug that's triggering.
I mean, it's like the party's going, and it's like someone's just someone's, walked in there with sort of like, 2.5 kilos full of crack. And we don't know what it is. It's like, oh, this is good. What do you do with it? You put it in a glass pipe. What happens next? Woo! And it's
Oh, shit.
went well.
Yeah.
Listen, that's actually not bad. Okay, so what do we know when people happen, right? They're going to be unforeseen. Dependency is going to shoot up.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what I said. People are going to stop thinking for themselves. People are going to stop communication, human to human communication is going to be damaged.
Yeah.
It's going to become an idol. It's going to become a dependency.
Yeah.
And then most likely what will happen is access to it will end up costing more.
Yeah.
This is like a free taste from the dealer.
No, I talk about that. It's funny you say that, because I've given loads of these weird talks, and I actually talk about that because, as you well know, I'm sure, dopamine is exactly the same drug in your brain that gets released when you drink alcohol or any drug whatsoever, heroin, anything. And actually, that sort of rather edgy feeling that you have when you've got a hangover of lack of patience and fractious sort of feeling, I think, is the essence of destroying relationships. And so I think what you just said is bang on the money, Paul. I think one of the things I talked about, which I sort of forget about and then comes back to me, is that if we had an epidemic of heroin throughout the UK or throughout the world that was anything like on this scale, then somebody would do something about it. The fact that the epidemic or the addiction is not heroin, it's actually more pernicious, far more pernicious than heroin.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Far more pernicious than heroin. It's everywhere. It's normalized, and also it's driving the biggest cover up of ethics, the biggest trashing of it's Antichrist, definitely Antichrist. Christians don't get good press in this mess, it's the ideal sort of drug fueled nightmare that doesn't end well. So, and it's an addiction, and I think that my definition of an addiction is that people do not have control, Paul, of what they do. And actually what you normally do about that is you legislate against it. If there's something that's really bad for you, and like taking heroin, or I don't know, driving your car at 150 miles an hour, which I used to all the time, by the way. I've never taken any drugs, thank God. But I've certainly drove my car stupidly fast. There has to be a law against that, because not many people can drive the car.
Yeah, I know, but I agree with you to a point, but you've just said that it's accepted, unlike heroin or all those other things. It doesn't have that negative cachet. It's like we've got addicted to, it's like workaholism.
Yeah.
Workaholism is a really serious issue, and it leads to suicides, it breaks up families, but we're okay with it. And that's the same problem with this. Yeah. We're okay with it. We don't see it as a problem.
I know. And I think that's why my book is, can't remember what my tech book is actually all about reducing people to dope on a rope, Paul. And it's demonic. Demonic. The devil is all about being untrue and diverting people away from truth. So I think that's what we're facing. I think that's what we're facing, and that's why
division, diversion, and then discouragement.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what we're facing. And I think what concerns me, this is why I'm so passionate about this, because I do not like. I'm a great supporter of the underdog, and if anybody ever, if some child got attacked or something, God forbid that person who's attacking that child, or if any underdog ever gets taken advantage of, I'm always the first person to, to defend them. And also, conversely, I'm also the person who will stand up to a CEO and make the tough calls in a business as well. So I'm sort of my motivation is actually to support the underdog, and also to stand up to the powers that be to try and get that realignment. But what concerns me is that I don't think many CEOs are fundamentally evil, but I think they are being heavily deceived and they're not fully aware of this. And I just
don't think they're awake. And I think for CEOs, it's like you know, it's what I've been saying for the last 2 years now. We're in a very, we're sailing very uncharted waters. People are, and not really in a good way. You know, the whole idea of polycrisis. So,
Yeah.
you know, whereas in good times, you know, you can sort of like, your anxiety is lower. You can think more expansively,
Yeah.
and you have the time to make better decisions. Those times are not now. So
Yeah.
I think CEOs have just dumbed down.
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to come back either, because it's somebody could quite easily go on and say this is a phase we're going through. I don't think this is a phase we're going through. I think this addiction will continue unless it's unchecked. And you know, going back to demonic stuff, if you open the door to the devil, then for sure you're going to get some unpredictable results. And look what we've got.
Well, yeah, because this is, like I said, this is artificial intelligence, which is the precursor to AGI.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, you know, that is kind of like that's got to be the difference between beer and heroin.
I know. And actually, one of the things I noticed, I'm on this committee in the House of Lords Artificial Intelligence Group, so I listen to all of the dialogue around this. And one of the interesting thing is that people have got no idea how advanced China are or anywhere else. They think in the UK, in fact, the UK national strategy is one of thinking we're great at technology. We're so far behind, it's unbelievable. We have no chance of catching up with China, because the rate of development is exponential, Paul. And what that means is if you're 1 day behind, right, you will never catch the person who's 1 day ahead, ever, right? And they are years ahead. China have got control over AI and quantum computing. They're the two main factors. They haven't got control over chips, but that's why they want to take over Taiwan. Once they've got control over chips, we are dead in the water. So, and this does fit their model of utter control, utter tyranny, and it's something that we just do not want. I think we need to do something about it. So, yeah. Any final thoughts, Paul, to cheer people up on this?
If something's too good to be true,
what was that? Sorry?
You know, if something feels too good to be true, then beware. Or as Jordan Peterson said, you know, beware of wisdom you haven't earned. He was talking about psychedelics, but it's like, it's the same with AI. It's like, yeah, there's going to be a cost to this.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think as well. I think I'd just add one thing to that. If people feel that they don't think something's right, they should articulate that. And I used to work for a really smart bloke called when I was in automotive, doing proper engineering and proper technology at Lucas. There's a guy called Kevin Hennessy I used to work for, really bloody excellent bloke. He and I used to take on the world single-handedly in quite a large business, and bloody excellent mentor. And he said what he used to do in management meetings, he used to find himself a bit like this, you know, not necessarily like this, but this topic. He used to find himself and I'd say, look, I don't know what it is, but I don't like that. Right.
Yeah.
And actually,
that's exactly how I feel. Absolutely. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of fun, but there's something, yeah.
Yeah, and actually I think it's very important. And again, there's another mantra actually around this, which is deadly, which is let's collect some data on it. No. Don't collect some data on it. It's wrong. Because intuitively, you know if it's wrong. Because, and actually come back to the Bible, Paul said, if you feel like something's wrong, it's wrong. That's the definition of sin. It's not more data. So I think that's part of the problem, where people are bowling on. Well, give us the data, show it's not working. It's bloody obvious. People are committing suicide left, right, and centre. 94% of under 30 that figures are highly stressed. So I think and actually this is where the cover up is. This stuff is not coming to light. So Paul, fantastic discussion. I've got to go, my friend. I've got someone just turned up to see me.
Right, no worries, brother. Take care.
Yeah, have fun. See you later, man.
God bless.
Bye.